Nate Caldwell snapped awake long before the first hint of dawn bled through the Manhattan skyline. He lay still, the rhythmic tap-tap-tapping of rain against the vast bedroom window, a counterpoint to the frantic drumming in his chest. This wasn't just another Tuesday. This was deal day. The air in his minimalist Tribeca loft, usually cool and controlled, crackled with an almost electric tension. Today he faced Anthony "Tony" Devereaux, a potential business partner whose Midas touch could catapult Caldwell Industries into the stratosphere, or leave Nate's carefully constructed empire vulnerable. Despite the ungodly hour, Nate felt the familiar vice grip of high-stakes anxiety. He swung his legs out of bed, the cool marble floor a shock against his bare feet. The city lights glittered below, indifferent jewels scattered across a rain-slicked canvas. He padded towards the ensuite bathroom, the vast space echoing his solitary ambition. Standing under the scalding spray of the rain shower, Nate tried to force the tension from his shoulders, but images of spreadsheets and contract clauses swam relentlessly behind his closed eyelids. This meeting wasn't just business. It was a pivot, a potential legacy-defining moment. Failure wasn't an option he entertained. After showering, he selected a razor-sharp Armani power suit, the dark charcoal fabric a testament to his confidence, a shield against doubt. He knotted a silk tie with practiced precision, his reflection staring back, cool, composed, resolute. Downstairs in the state-of-the-art kitchen, a mug of brutally strong black coffee awaited, prepared by Louisa, his housekeeper, who moved with silent efficiency. Nate sat at the polished granite island, scrolling through market updates and emails on his tablet. Every second of his morning was meticulously choreographed. Breakfast, a protein shake, and a dry piece of toast was consumed without tasting it. He double-checked his briefcase, presentation decks, financial projections, tablet, chargers, backup hard copies in labeled folders. Satisfied, he grabbed his tailored overcoat. Outside, the pre-dawn air was damp and chilly. The fine drizzle persisted, turning the sidewalks into dark mirrors. Nate turned up his collar, the moisture beading on the expensive wool, and strode towards the waiting black Mercedes sedan where his driver, Alex, held the door. "Morning, Mr. Caldwell," Alex murmured. Nate just nodded, his mind already miles away, rehearsing his opening lines. He needed to be at the office tower early, to walk the floor, feel the energy, run through the Devereaux dossier one last time. The drive through the awakening city was swift, the rain slicking the streets, but traffic still light. As Alex pulled into the private garage beneath the towering Caldwell Industries building, Nate felt a surge of adrenaline. This was his domain. He strode through the gleaming lobby, gave a curt nod to the security guard, and took the express elevator straight to the penthouse floor. The doors whispered open, revealing his sanctuary of glass and steel overlooking the sprawling city. Just as he reached his office door, a familiar voice cut through the quiet hum. "Nate? Got a minute?" It was David Miller, his lawyer, looking sharp and ready. "Yeah, David, come on in," Nate replied, unlocking his office door. The final strategy session was about to begin. The air inside Nate Caldwell's expansive corner office, with its panoramic views of the New York City skyline, felt charged, a pressure cooker of anticipation. David Miller, Nate's longtime corporate attorney, shrewd, meticulous, and unflappable, closed the heavy glass door behind him, the click echoing slightly in the large space. He placed his leather briefcase on the polished mahogany desk and opened it, extracting a sheaf of documents bound in a neat blue cover. "Okay, Nate," David began, his tone all business. "Here are the final revisions we discussed last night. I've highlighted the key clauses regarding payout structures and exit strategies, just as you requested." He slid the papers across the desk. Nate picked them up, his eyes scanning the dense text, already absorbing the fine print. He leaned back in his high-backed leather chair, the city stretching out behind him like a conquered territory. "Make absolutely sure there's zero ambiguity on the performance bonuses and the vesting schedule, David," Nate instructed, his gaze fixed on Clause 4. "B. Devereaux plays hardball. I don't want any wiggle room for interpretation later." David nodded, adjusting his glasses. "Completely agree, Nate. I went over it with a fine-tooth comb after our call. The language is crystal clear, protects our interests fully. Milestones are explicitly defined, payment triggers are non-negotiable. It's ironclad. They spent the next 40 minutes dissecting the agreement, point by point, anticipating potential objections from Devereaux's side, strategizing counter-arguments. Nate's focus was laser-sharp, his questions precise. David provided calm, reasoned answers, his legal mind navigating the complexities with ease. As they were wrapping up, Nate's executive assistant, Pauline, glided in silently, carrying a silver tray with 2 steaming cups of coffee. She placed them carefully on coasters on the desk. "Thank you, Pauline," Nate murmured, glancing appreciatively at the dark brew before his eyes flickered to the expensive watch on his wrist. The meeting was less than 2 hours away. The low hum of anxiety beneath his cool exterior intensified. "Remember the main thing today, Nate," David said, leaning forward conspiratorially as Pauline exited. "Stay in control. Devereaux is known for his creative negotiation tactics. He likes to throw curveballs, test your nerve." David took a slow sip of his coffee. He might feign disinterest, suddenly question a point everyone thought was settled, maybe even bring up some irrelevant personal anecdote to throw you off balance. Don't bite. Nate met his lawyer's steady gaze, a flicker of steel in his own eyes. "Don't worry, David," he said, his voice low and confident, pushing aside any lingering tendrils of doubt. "I'll be ready for anything Tony Devereaux throws my way. This deal is too important." He took a gulp of the hot coffee, the bitterness grounding him. The calm before the storm was over. It was time to prepare for battle in the boardroom. An hour later, Nate Caldwell commanded the head of the vast, state-of-the-art conference table in the Caldwell Industries boardroom. Sunlight, now breaking through the morning clouds, streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the polished chrome and glass. He exuded an aura of calm control, though beneath the surface, his nerves were taut wires. The door opened precisely on time, and Anthony Tony Devereaux strode in, radiating confidence and charisma. He was impeccably dressed, a silver-haired titan of industry with eyes that missed nothing. A broad, assured smile played on his lips as he extended a hand across the table. "Nate, good to finally put a face to the impressive reputation," Devereaux's voice boomed, warm yet undeniably powerful. Nate rose smoothly, meeting the handshake firmly. "Tony, welcome. Thanks for coming downtown. Please have a seat." He gestured to the plush leather chair opposite him. Pleasantries were exchanged, brief, efficient acknowledgments of the weather, the traffic, the stunning view. Then, Devereaux got straight to the point, his smile fading slightly, replaced by a look of keen assessment. "So, Nate," he began, leaning back slightly, steepling his fingers, "I've reviewed your proposal. Impressive ambition, I'll give you that. Very ambitious." He paused, letting the word hang in the air. "But I have some reservations about the scalability of your expansion plan, particularly the international logistics. Seems optimistic." Nate remained impassive, betraying no reaction to the subtle challenge. "Please, Tony, lay out your concerns. We've run extensive feasibility studies, and I'm confident in our projections. I'm happy to walk you through the data again." He maintained steady eye contact, projecting unwavering belief in his strategy. The next few hours unfolded as a masterclass in negotiation. Devereaux probed, questioned, challenged every assumption. He dissected the financial models, queried market share projections, raised hypothetical roadblocks. Nate parried each point with cool logic, presenting supporting data, case studies, and contingency plans. He never lost his composure, never rose to the bait when Devereaux employed a calculated pause or a seemingly offhand critical remark. David Miller sat silently beside Nate, occasionally passing a note or subtly nodding confirmation, but Nate commanded the conversation. He knew his business inside out, and his passion for the project was palpable, tempered by rigorous analysis. He wasn't just selling a deal, he was selling his vision, his capability. Finally, after a particularly intense exchange regarding risk mitigation, Devereaux leaned back, picked up the gold pen lying beside his portfolio, and tapped it thoughtfully on the table. A slow smile returned to his face, this time seemingly genuine. "All right, Nate," he said, his tone shifting from adversarial to appreciative. You've done your homework, your foresight. It's commendable. He uncapped the pen. Your proposal is well conceived. Damned well conceived. I'm in. Let's sign this thing. Nate felt a wave of profound relief wash over him, so potent his hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he reached for his own pen. The tension that had held him captive for weeks finally began to dissipate. They signed the multiple copies, the scratching of pens the only sound in the room. Once done, both men stood, shaking hands again, the grip firm and decisive. Glad we could come to an agreement, Tony, Nate said, a genuine smile finally breaking through his professional facade. Devereaux clapped him on the shoulder. Pleasure doing business, Nate. This is going to be big. The deal was done. Victory. Nate felt an almost giddy sense of triumph as Devereaux and his team departed. He immediately headed back towards his office, adrenaline still coursing through him. His best friend and COO, Miles Corbin, was already waiting outside his door, 2 heavy crystal tumblers, and a bottle of expensive single malt scotch in hand. Buddy, Miles grinned, holding up the bottle. Something tells me this calls for a celebration. Nate's office felt like a sanctuary after the high-pressure atmosphere of the boardroom. Miles Corbin, Nate's oldest friend and trusted second-in-command, was already pouring generous measures of the Macallan 18 into the crystal tumblers. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room, bathing the luxurious space in a warm golden glow. Well, Miles prompted, handing Nate a glass. Don't keep me in suspense, man. Did the Silver Fox sign on the dotted line? Nate took the glass, the weight of it strangely grounding. He raised it in a toast. To Devereaux, he said, a triumphant grin finally spreading across his face. And to the future of Caldwell Industries. He signed Miles. We closed it. Yes! Miles let out a whoop, clinking his glass against Nate's. Knew you could do it. Never doubted you for a second. He took a hearty swig of the scotch. Man, I was sweating bullets out here. Devereaux's team looked like they were marching to an execution when they went in. Nate chuckled, sinking into one of the plush leather armchairs near the window. He took a slow sip of the scotch, savoring the complex, peaty flavor and the burn as it went down. Honestly, Miles, he admitted, the adrenaline finally ebbing, replaced by a profound exhaustion. For a while there, I thought it might go south. Tony pushed hard, questioned everything. But you handled it, Miles said confidently, settling into the chair opposite him. You always do. You've got that knack, Nate. Seeing the angles, staying 10 steps ahead. It's why we make a damn good team. He propped his feet up on the low coffee table between them. So, Miles continued, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, what's the plan now? World domination by Q4? Nate smiled faintly. Something like that. First, though, he hesitated, the triumphant mood suddenly dimming. First, I need to smooth things over at home. Miles lowered his feet, his expression shifting from celebratory to concerned. Uh-oh, trouble in paradise? What's up with Mariah? Nate sighed, staring out at the sprawling cityscape. The victory felt hollow now, overshadowed by the tension simmering beneath the surface of his personal life. We had a fight this morning, he confessed, his voice quiet. A bad one. About what? Miles asked gently. The usual? Nate ran a hand through his hair. Yeah, she feels trapped, cooped up. Says I'm never around, always working. He swirled his scotch, avoiding Miles's gaze. She used to be so driven, Miles, you know? Her art, the gallery scene, always buzzing with energy. Now, it's like she's just drifting, and she hates it when I bring up starting a family. His voice softened, a hint of worry creeping in. This morning, she was furious, said some things. It wasn't pretty. Miles listened patiently, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced with seriousness. He knew Nate and Mariah's dynamic, the push and pull between Nate's relentless ambition and Mariah's yearning for spontaneity and connection. Okay, Miles said pragmatically. So what's the play? Big gesture? Flowers? Jewelry? Nate considered it for a moment. I was thinking, a romantic dinner tonight. Maybe that place she likes downtown, the one with the candlelight and the crazy good pasta. Try and reconnect. Remind her. Remind us. What matters? He looked at Miles, seeking reassurance. Good idea. Excellent idea, Miles affirmed, clapping him lightly on the shoulder. Mariah's a great woman, Nate. She just needs to know she's still your priority, even when you're building an empire. Go wine her and dine her. Smooth it over. Nate nodded, trying to muster some optimism. Yeah, I'll do that. But as he finished his scotch, a knot of unease remained. The look in Mariah's eyes that morning. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, something that a fancy dinner might not be able to fix. The weight of his business victory suddenly felt very heavy indeed. Nate pulled up to their sleek, modern townhouse late that evening, the city lights reflecting off the rain-slicked street. The sky had cleared somewhat, but a damp chill hung in the air. He'd spent the last hour on the phone, securing a prime table at a notoriously exclusive downtown restaurant, picturing Mariah's surprise, hoping the romantic gesture would bridge the gap that had yawned between them that morning. He paid Alex, his driver, and stepped out, briefcase in hand, feeling a flicker of hopeful anticipation. But as he approached the front door, an odd stillness struck him. Usually, he could hear the faint strains of music or the glow of the television from inside. Tonight, silence. And Mariah's car, usually parked neatly in its designated spot, was conspicuously absent. A prickle of unease traced its way down his spine. "Mariah?" he called out as he unlocked the door and stepped into the dimly lit foyer. The silence amplified, pressing in on him. "Honey, I'm home." No answer. He dropped his briefcase by the wall, the sound echoing in the cavernous entryway. He walked into the living room. Stark white walls, minimalist furniture, everything impeccably arranged, yet it felt empty, cold. Usually, Mariah filled the space with her presence, a half-finished painting on an easel, fashion magazines scattered on the coffee table, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air. Tonight, nothing. He moved towards the kitchen. On the gleaming quartz countertop sat 2 crystal wine glasses, clean and dry, beside an unopened bottle of Chardonnay they'd planned to share days ago. Her designer handbag, the one she carried everywhere, lay abandoned on a bar stool. This sent a fresh jolt of alarm through him. Where would Mariah go without her purse? He spun around, scanning the room again. Then he saw it. On the low-glass coffee table in the living room, nestled beside the remote control, was the blinking notification light of his personal cell phone, which he'd accidentally left behind in his rush that morning. Several missed calls from Miles, probably checking in, and one unread text message, from Mariah. His thumb hovered over the screen, a sense of dread tightening his chest. He opened the message. Had to get out. Be back later. Don't wait up. Concise. Cold. Devoid of any warmth or explanation. Nate sank onto the plush sofa, the expensive fabric suddenly feeling abrasive. Where had she gone? Why leave her purse? Why the cryptic message? His mind raced, conjuring scenarios, each worse than the last. As he sat there, trying to piece it together, his gaze fell on a small folded piece of heavy cream paper, tucked partially under a design magazine. Not his phone message. Something else. He picked it up. It was Mariah's handwriting, elegant but slightly shaky. Nate, I need time to think. This morning, it made me realize things aren't right between us. Not really. I've gone to stay with Chloe for a bit. We'll talk when I get back. He lowered the note, the paper crumpling slightly in his grip. His heart hammered against his ribs. Chloe? Her flighty artist friend? This wasn't the romantic reconciliation he'd envisioned. It felt like a door slamming shut. Hours crawled by. The silence in the house became oppressive. Nate paced, checked his phone compulsively, poured himself a drink he didn't want. Finally, long after midnight, he heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. A taxi. He rushed to the window, peering through the blinds. Mariah stumbled out, unsteady on her feet, fumbling with her keys. Nate's relief was instantly replaced by anger and concern. He flung open the front door just as she reached the top step. "Mariah, where the hell have you been? What's going on?" He reached out to steady her as she swayed. She looked up at him, her eyes unfocused, her makeup slightly smeared. A bitter, humorless smile twisted her lips. "What's going on?" she slurred, mimicking his tone with cutting irony. Then her voice dropped, laced with a venom that struck him like a physical blow. "I hate you, Nate. God, I hate you." The words hung in the night air, sharp and poisonous, shattering the fragile hope he'd clung to. The next morning dawned gray and oppressive, mirroring the atmosphere inside the Caldwell townhouse. Nate sat at the kitchen island, nursing a black coffee, laptop open but untouched. The remnants of last night's confrontation hung heavy in the air. Mariah's venomous words, the reek of alcohol clinging to her, the way he'd had to practically carry her upstairs and put her to bed like a child. He hadn't slept, replaying the scene, trying to understand the depth of her anger, her despair. He heard movement upstairs, then slow footsteps descending the minimalist staircase. Mariah appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking pale and exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. She clutched her head slightly, avoiding his gaze as she went straight to the filtered water dispenser. "Oh," she said flatly, noticing him. "You're still here. Not rushing off to the office?" She filled a glass and drank greedily. "Good morning to you too, Mariah," Nate replied, pushing his laptop aside. His voice was tight with a mixture of frustration and concern. "Don't you think we need to talk about last night? About anything?" She turned, leaning against the counter, her expression wary. "Talk about what, Nate? About how you run your empire while I rattle around this museum you call a home?" "That's not fair," Nate countered, trying to keep his voice even. "Mariah, this isn't you, the drinking, staying out all night. What happened to the woman I married? The one who used to spend hours at the gym, who was passionate about her art projects, who lit up every room she walked into?" He stood up, moving towards her, his voice softening. "What happened to us?" Mariah flinched as if struck. "What happened? You happened, Nate. Your ambition, your deals, your endless need for more. And now," her voice rose, trembling with emotion, "now you decide it's time for the perfect accessory. A baby. Did you ever once stop to actually ask me if I wanted that? If I'm ready to trade my life, my body, myself for your heir?" Nate stared at her, momentarily stunned into silence by the raw pain and accusation in her voice. He hadn't realized the depth of her resistance, her fear. "Mariah, I thought it was something we both wanted eventually," he stammered. "Eventually? When you decided it was convenient?" Mariah pushed herself away from the counter, pacing agitatedly. "What if I don't want to get fat, Nate? What if I can't stand the thought of losing myself completely? What if my art is the only baby I want right now? Does that even register with you?" She was trembling now, her breath coming in short gasps. Nate felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. He reached out, wanting to comfort her, but she recoiled. "Honey, maybe we should talk to someone," he suggested gently, hesitantly. "Dr. Stevens? He helped you before when you were feeling overwhelmed." Mariah froze, her eyes widening in horror and fury. She snatched a heavy crystal water glass from the counter. "Dr. Stevens? Are you serious? You want to ship me off to the loony bin again just because I don't fit into your perfect little plan?" Her voice cracked. "Is that your solution for everything you can't control?" "No, Mariah, it's not like that," Nate pleaded, taking a step back. "It's a clinic, a place where they can help you cope, help you feel better." "I'm fine," she screamed, her control finally snapping. With a convulsive sob, she hurled the glass against the pristine white wall. It shattered violently, sending shards flying across the polished floor. The sharp, explosive sound hung in the stunned silence that followed. Mariah stood amidst the glittering fragments, chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. Nate stared at the broken glass, then at his wife, a cold dread settling in his stomach. This was worse than he thought, much worse. Nate stood frozen for a moment, the image of the shattered glass mirroring the state of his marriage. Mariah's ragged breathing filled the tense silence. He slowly approached her, careful to avoid the shards littering the floor. "Mariah," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. He reached out and gently took her arm. She didn't pull away this time, simply stood there, trembling uncontrollably. He carefully guided her away from the mess, towards the living room sofa. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice choked with tears, barely audible. I'm just so tired, Nate. So lost." "I know," he said softly, sitting beside her, pulling her into a tentative embrace. She leaned against him, exhausted, depleted. "I know." He held her for a long time, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that this wasn't just a bad patch. This was a crisis spiraling out of control. Later, after Mariah had retreated to the bedroom, pleading exhaustion, Nate found himself pacing the length of the living room, the earlier scene replaying in his mind. The volatility, the drinking, the paranoia about Dr. Stevens. It painted a terrifying picture. He picked up his phone, his hand shaking slightly. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he dreaded calling. Dr. Samuel Stevens. The phone seemed to ring forever in the unnerving silence of the house before a calm, professional voice answered. "Dr. Stevens's office." "Yes, hello. This is Nathan Caldwell. May I speak with Dr. Stevens, please? It's about my wife, Mariah." There was a brief pause. "One moment, Mr. Caldwell." A few seconds later, the doctor's familiar, measured tone came on the line. "Nate, good to hear from you, though I suspect this isn't a social call. How is Mariah?" Nate sank onto the sofa again, rubbing his temples. "Doctor, I'm really worried. Things have gotten bad. She's not herself. The drinking is escalating. She's constantly on edge, lashing out. This morning, she completely lost it. Broke things. She seemed terrified I'd try to send her back to the clinic." Nate recounted the events of the last 24 hours, his voice low and strained, describing the mood swings, the hostility, the deep despair he sensed beneath the anger. Dr. Stevens listened patiently, interjecting occasionally with clarifying questions. "Nate," the doctor said finally, his voice gentle but firm, "based on what you're describing, and knowing her history, I strongly recommend we admit her for observation and stabilization. Her current state sounds precarious." Nate's stomach clenched. "She'll never agree, doctor. She flat out refuses. She thinks she's fine, that I'm the problem." "That lack of insight is often part of the illness, Nate," Dr. Stevens explained calmly. "It makes voluntary treatment difficult, sometimes impossible. But we can't stand by if her safety or potentially yours is at risk. We may need to consider an involuntary admission." The words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Involuntary admission, forcing his wife into treatment. The thought made Nate feel physically ill. Is there no other way? At this point, given the rapid escalation you describe, it seems the safest and most responsible course of action, Dr. Stevens replied gravely. "We can arrange for a discreet transport team. They are professionals, trained to handle these delicate situations with care." Nate closed his eyes, the weight of the decision crushing him. He thought of Mariah's terrified face, her screams, but he also thought of her safety, her health. I need to think about it, doctor. Let me call you back." "Please don't wait too long, Nate," the doctor urged kindly but seriously. "This is in Mariah's best interest." Nate ended the call, his hand trembling. He walked to the window, staring blindly out at the city. Could he do it? Could he make that call? The next day, after another night punctuated by Mariah's restless turning and muttered anxieties, Nate knew he had no choice. He picked up the phone, his heart pounding. "Dr. Stevens? It's Nate Caldwell. I've made my decision. Please, help us." Late that evening, the doorbell rang, a sharp, intrusive sound in the strained quiet of the house. Nate's blood ran cold. He'd told Mariah they needed to talk, coaxed her downstairs. She sat on the sofa, wary, suspicious. "Who is that?" she asked, her voice tight. Nate took a deep breath. "Mariah, I called Dr. Stevens. Some people are here to help." Her eyes widened in sheer terror and betrayal. "No, Nate, you didn't!" She scrambled up, backing away as he moved towards the door. "You can't do this." He opened the door. Two calm, professional-looking medical attendants stood on the threshold. "Mr. Caldwell? We're here for Mrs. Caldwell." As they stepped inside, Mariah let out a heart-wrenching scream. Get away from me! Nate, don't let them! She fought wildly as they approached her gently but firmly, trying to restrain her. Her cries of terror and betrayal ripped through Nate, each one a physical blow. He stood frozen, helpless, watching them guide his struggling, sobbing wife out of the house. "I'm sorry, Mariah, I love you," he choked out as the door closed, leaving him alone in the echoing silence, the guilt a lead weight in his soul. He had done what he thought was necessary, but it felt like the ultimate betrayal. The silence in the townhouse after Mariah was taken was deafening, amplifying Nate's crushing guilt. The image of her terrified eyes, her desperate struggles, was seared into his memory. He wandered aimlessly through the perfectly appointed rooms, each object a stark reminder of the life they had tried to build, a life now fractured, perhaps irreparably. He knew his next call was unavoidable, and possibly even more difficult than the one to Dr. Stevens. He had to tell Mariah's father. Taking a deep, unsteadying breath, he dialed Lawrence Bellwether's number. Larry, a retired investment banker, was a formidable man, fiercely protective of his only daughter. The phone was answered on the third ring. "Larry Bellwether speaking." "Larry, it's Nate." Nate's voice was hoarse. There was a pause on the other end. "Nate, you sound rough. Is everything all right? Is Mariah okay?" Larry's tone immediately sharpened with concern. Nate closed his eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "Larry, I have some difficult news. About Mariah." He proceeded to explain the events of the past few days, the escalating instability, the drinking, the outburst, the doctor's recommendation, and finally, the involuntary admission to Dr. Stevens's private clinic upstate. He braced himself for anger, for accusations. Instead, there was a long, heavy silence, filled only by the sound of Larry's slow, pained breathing. "Hospitalized," Larry finally repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Oh, Nate, I knew she wasn't herself lately, but why didn't you call me sooner?" "It all happened so fast, Larry," Nate explained, the guilt washing over him again. "I was trying to handle it, hoping it would pass. I didn't want to worry you unnecessarily. I'm so sorry I didn't involve you earlier." "Don't apologize, son," Larry said, his voice weary but kind. "I know you love her. I know you did what you thought was best. It takes courage to make a decision like that." Relief, sharp and unexpected, flooded Nate. How is she now?" Larry asked. "She's safe, Larry. Dr. Stevens assures me she's getting the best possible care. They're starting her on a treatment plan." "Thank you, Nate, for taking care of her, even when it's hard. Keep me updated, please. Anything at all." "Of course, Larry. And thank you for understanding." Hanging up, Nate felt a fraction of the weight lift, but the underlying ache remained. He knew he couldn't dwell in the wreckage of his personal life. Work was his refuge, his structure. He forced himself to shower, dress, and head to the office. The Devereaux deal needed meticulous follow-through, and there was another major project looming, a potential partnership with Nicholas Petrov on groundbreaking manufacturing technology. His assistant, Pauline, greeted him with a sympathetic but professional smile. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. Your 10 o'clock with Mr. Petrov is confirmed at the grill room." "Thanks, Pauline," Nate managed, trying to project normalcy. He needed this meeting, needed to focus on logistics and projections, anything other than the haunting echo of Mariah's cries. He arrived at the upscale restaurant precisely at 10. Nicholas Petrov, a distinguished man with sharp eyes and an Eastern European accent, was already seated. "Ah, Nathan, good to see you," Petrov greeted him, shaking his hand firmly. "Nicholas, thanks for meeting me," Nate replied, sliding into the booth, forcing his mind into business mode. Petrov launched directly into the details, spreading blueprints and spec sheets across the table. "As you know, Nate, this new automated system we are proposing, it promises unprecedented efficiency gains, fully integrated AI, predictive maintenance." Nate leaned forward, focusing intently, asking sharp questions about implementation timelines, quality control protocols, and integration with Caldwell Industries' existing infrastructure. He needed this project to succeed, not just for the business, but for his own sanity. For a couple of hours, Immersed in the complexities of engineering and finance, he almost forgot the turmoil churning beneath the surface. Almost. A few days later, Nate drove upstate to the private psychiatric facility where Mariah was being treated. The clinic was nestled in serene, manicured grounds, a stark contrast to the turmoil Nate felt churning inside him. The imposing gates, the quiet corridors, the hushed tones of the staff, it all felt surreal, alien. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach as he walked towards Mariah's wing, a mixture of dread and a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd see a glimmer of the woman he loved. He paused outside her door, took a deep breath, and knocked softly before entering. The room was sparsely furnished but comfortable, with a large window overlooking a tranquil garden. Mariah was sitting in an armchair, staring blankly out the window. She looked thinner, paler, her usual vibrant energy completely extinguished. She turned her head slowly as he entered, her eyes filled with a cold, weary resentment. "Mariah?" he said softly, taking a step into the room. "How are you feeling?" She didn't answer immediately, just watched him with an unnerving stillness. Then a flicker of anger sparked in her eyes. "How do you think I'm feeling, Nate?" Her voice was flat, devoid of its usual musicality. Locked up, drugged, betrayed. The word hung in the air like a physical blow. "Mariah, please," Nate pleaded, moving closer. "I didn't betray you. I did this because I love you, because I was scared for you. We all want you to get better." "Get better?" She laughed, a short, harsh sound. "By shipping me off like damaged goods? You just couldn't handle me, could you? I wasn't fitting neatly into your perfect life anymore." Her voice started to rise, trembling with bitterness. "You took away my freedom, Nate. You decided for me. I hate you for that." "I hate seeing you suffer," Nate countered, his own voice strained. "I couldn't just stand by and watch you destroy yourself." He sat tentatively on the edge of the visitor's chair opposite her. "Dr. Stevens says you're refusing the medication, Mariah. You have to try. You have to work with them." "Why should I?" she shot back, turning her face away, staring rigidly out the window again. "So I can be a good little Stepford wife for you? Go back to pretending everything's fine?" Nate felt a familiar wave of helplessness. He tried to talk about lighter things, about news from the city, about Miles sending his love, but she remained withdrawn, occasionally responding with monosyllabic, resentful answers. The connection between them felt severed, replaced by a chasm of hurt and misunderstanding. After what felt like an eternity, a nurse gently signaled that visiting time was nearly over. Nate stood up, aching with a sense of failure. "I love you, Mariah," he whispered, unsure if she even heard him. She didn't turn around. He found Dr. Stevens in his office down the hall. The doctor looked grave. "How is she, really?" Nate asked, sinking into a chair, the facade of strength crumbling. Dr. Stevens steepled his fingers, choosing his words carefully. "Nate, your wife is struggling significantly. She remains highly resistant to treatment, particularly the medication, which is hindering any real progress. She perceives her hospitalization as a punishment, a betrayal, as you saw." "Will she get better?" Nate asked, his voice barely audible. "How long will this take?" The doctor sighed. "Honestly, Nate, it's impossible to say with certainty. These conditions, they can be complex. We could be looking at months, possibly longer. Recovery depends heavily on her willingness to engage with the therapy and accept help." He paused, his expression somber. "And frankly, given her current mindset and the nature of her struggles, the prognosis for her being able to manage the stresses of motherhood in the foreseeable future is guarded." The words, though gently spoken, landed like hammer blows. Motherhood. The dream he'd held, the future he'd envisioned, fading. "What can I do?" Nate asked, feeling utterly powerless. "Be patient," Dr. Stevens advised. "Visit when appropriate, show your support, but manage your expectations. This will be a long road, Nate, for both of you." Nate left the clinic feeling heavier than when he arrived, the serene landscape mocking his internal chaos. The path forward seemed shrouded in fog, with no clear destination in sight. Nate threw himself back into work with fierce intensity, the relentless demands of Caldwell Industries, a welcome distraction from the bleakness of Mariah's situation and his own gnawing guilt. Days blurred into weeks, filled with meetings, strategic planning, and damage control on the Devereaux integration. He was in the middle of a tense, late-night negotiation session at a high-end steakhouse with Paul Young, a key investor in the Petrov manufacturing project, when his phone buzzed insistently. It was Miles. Nate ignored it, focusing on reassuring Young about supply chain contingencies. The phone buzzed again, more urgently. "Excuse me for one moment, Paul," Nate said smoothly, stepping away from the table. "Miles, what is it?" "I'm in a meeting." "Nate, we've got a major fire." Miles's voice was tight with stress. "That primary supplier for the Petrov project, the one based in Germany, they just declared bankruptcy, effective immediately." Nate felt a cold dread seep through him. "Are you serious? Their components are critical. This could derail the entire launch." "Tell me about it," Miles groaned. "We need an alternative like yesterday. Young is going to freak if he hears about this before we have a solution." Nate's mind raced. Okay, stall Young. Tell him I had a family emergency, have to step out, but we'll circle back first thing tomorrow with updated projections. Buy me some time. Get the team working on sourcing alternatives. Check with the secondary suppliers in Asia, see if they can ramp up production. I'm on my way back to the office now. He returned to the table, putting on his most composed face. "Paul, my sincerest apologies. An urgent personal matter has come up that requires my immediate attention. Unavoidable. Can we please reschedule for tomorrow morning? I'll have finalized contingency figures for you then." Paul Young, initially looking annoyed, softened slightly at Nate's grave expression. "Of course, Nate. Family first. Hope everything is all right." "Thank you for your understanding," Nate said, shaking his hand firmly before making a swift exit. Hours later, after a grueling session at the office coordinating with Miles and his frantic team, Nate was finally heading home, exhausted and mentally drained. Rain lashed against the windows of the Mercedes as Alex navigated the slick city streets. The crisis wasn't fully averted, but they had potential leads on new suppliers. As they turned onto a quieter side street near his neighborhood, Nate's eyes caught a flicker of movement on the dark, rain-soaked sidewalk. A woman, huddled under a flimsy, inadequate umbrella, clutched a small bundle to her chest. A baby. She looked soaked, lost, and desperate. Something clicked inside Nate. The sheer vulnerability of the scene cut through his own exhaustion and worries. "Alex, pull over," he ordered abruptly. Alex slowed the car to a smooth stop beside the curb. Nate didn't hesitate. He grabbed his own large umbrella from the seat beside him, opened the door, and stepped out into the downpour. He approached the woman cautiously. She flinched, pulling the baby tighter. She looked young, maybe early 20s, her face pale with cold and fatigue. The baby whimpered softly. "Excuse me," Nate said gently, holding the umbrella over her. "You look like you could use some help. It's no night to be out in this." The woman looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperation. I don't know where to go," she stammered, her teeth chattering. "My situation changed. Suddenly." Nate made a split-second decision. He couldn't leave them here. "Look, I have a warm, dry house just around the corner. You and your baby can stay there tonight. Get dry, get some rest. No strings attached." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his house keys, pressing them into her hand. She stared at them, then at him, disbelief warring with relief on her face. I don't know what to say. Thank you. You're very kind." "Alex." Nate turned to his driver, who was watching impassively. "Take them to my place. Make sure they get settled in. See if Louisa is still there or call her if needed. Whatever they need." He then gave Alex instructions to drop him at a nearby upscale bar, where he knew Miles often unwound. "I need a drink," he muttered, handing Alex a generous tip. As the Mercedes pulled away with the woman and child safely inside, Nate stood for a moment in the rain, feeling a strange mix of emotions. He'd just averted one crisis, only to step into another unknown. He headed towards the warm glow of the bar, needing the familiar comfort of Miles's friendship and a stiff drink more than ever. Nate pushed through the heavy oak door of the dimly lit cocktail lounge, shaking the lingering raindrops from his coat. He spotted Miles immediately, perched on a stool at the polished mahogany bar, nursing a scotch. Miles looked up, relief washing over his face. There you are. Thought you drowned out there. Drink? He signaled the bartender. Make it a double, Nate said, slumping onto the stool beside him. That was a night. Tell me about it, Miles sighed. Supplier crisis averted? Maybe, Nate replied wearily. We have options, but something else happened on the way home. He quickly recounted the story of the woman and child in the rain, his decision to send them to his house. Miles listened, eyebrows raised. Wow, Nate. Good Samaritan move. Risky, though. You don't know anything about her. I know, Nate conceded, taking a large gulp of the scotch the bartender placed before him. But I couldn't just drive past. She looked so desperate. And the baby, he trailed off, the image lingering. They talked for another hour, dissecting the supplier issue, the complexities of the Devereaux integration, and briefly, cautiously, touching upon Mariah's situation, Nate admitting the visit had been difficult. Eventually, drained, Nate headed home, the alcohol doing little to ease the knot of anxiety in his stomach about what he'd find. He let himself into the silent townhouse. Alex had texted earlier confirming the woman and child were settled in a guest room. He walked quietly past the room, not wanting to disturb them, and headed upstairs to his own bedroom, collapsing into an exhausted sleep. The next morning, Nate woke to an unusual sound, not the distant city hum, but a soft gurgling noise. Confused, he pulled on a robe and padded downstairs. He found Louisa, his housekeeper, standing in the middle of the living room, looking bewildered and concerned. On the large ottoman, wrapped snugly in one of Nate's expensive cashmere throws, lay the baby from the night before, awake, gurgling happily, and utterly alone. Mr. Caldwell, Louisa began, her voice hushed. I came in this morning. The guest room was empty. The woman, she's gone, but she left. Him? Louisa gestured towards the ottoman. Beside the baby lay a neatly folded piece of paper. Nate's heart hammered against his ribs. He walked slowly towards the ottoman, his gaze fixed on the tiny infant. The baby looked up at him with wide, curious blue eyes. Nate picked up the note, his hands trembling slightly. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Thank you for your kindness. I truly believe he will be better off with you. I love my son more than anything, but I can't give him the life he deserves. Please take care of him. His name is Aaron. He's 3 months old. Nate read the note twice, the words sinking in with devastating finality. She was gone. She'd left her child. His child now? He looked down at Aaron, who blinked up at him, then offered a gummy, trusting smile, reaching out a tiny fist. Something shifted inside Nate, a profound, unexpected wave of protectiveness washing over the shock and confusion. Louisa watched him anxiously. Mr. Caldwell, what are we going to do? Nate looked from the baby to Louisa, a sudden startling clarity cutting through the chaos of the past weeks. He reached down and carefully, hesitantly, scooped the warm, surprisingly solid weight of the baby into his arms. Aaron snuggled against his chest instinctively. His name is Aaron, Nate said softly, his voice thick with emotion, stroking the baby's soft cheek. And we, he met Louisa's wide eyes, a newfound resolve hardening his gaze, are going to take care of him. Louisa nodded slowly, a small smile touching her lips. Okay, Mr. Caldwell. Okay. Louisa, Nate continued, already shifting into practical mode. Can you call that high-end baby store on Madison? Order everything. Crib, clothes, diapers, formula. Everything a 3-month-old needs. Top of the line. Have it delivered today. Right away, Mr. Caldwell, Louisa replied, already reaching for her phone. Nate looked down at Aaron again, the baby's trusting gaze meeting his. The path ahead was utterly unknown, terrifyingly complex. But for the first time in a long time, Nate felt a flicker of something other than anxiety or guilt. It felt strangely like purpose, a tiny, fragile, unexpected purpose, now cradled in his arms. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment. Nate's pristine Tribeca townhouse was suddenly filled with the paraphernalia of infancy, a sleek, modern crib assembled in a spare room, designer baby clothes folded neatly in drawers, the faint scent of baby powder mingling with the expensive cologne Nate usually wore. He canceled all non-essential meetings, delegating furiously to Miles, his focus shifting dramatically. His first priority was Aaron. Armed with childcare manuals and Louise's practical guidance, Nate clumsily learned to change diapers, warm bottles, and decipher the nuances between a hungry cry and a tired whimper. It was exhausting, overwhelming, yet strangely grounding. He hired a highly recommended nanny, Eleanor, a warm, calm woman in her late 50s, with kind eyes and a soothing presence that reminded Nate vaguely of his own mother. Eleanor's arrival brought a much-needed sense of order and expertise, allowing Nate to breathe slightly easier, knowing Aaron was in capable, loving hands, even when business demanded his attention. Simultaneously, Nate engaged a new lawyer, Viktor Ivanov, a specialist in family law and adoption. "I want to make this official, Viktor," Nate stated unequivocally during their first meeting, Aaron sleeping peacefully in a carrier beside his chair. "I want to be his legal guardian, potentially adopt him down the line. Whatever it takes." The legal process was complex, filing for emergency temporary custody, background checks, home studies by social workers. Nate navigated it all with the same meticulous determination he applied to his business deals. Weeks turned into a couple of months, and finally, the day arrived for the final guardianship hearing in family court. Nate stood before the judge, impeccably dressed, holding a slightly fidgety Aaron in his arms. Viktor presented the case, highlighting Nate's commitment, the stable home environment, the extensive support system he'd established. "Your Honor," Nate said, his voice clear and steady when invited to speak, "Aaron came into my life unexpectedly, but he has become my son in every way that matters. I promise to provide him with a safe, loving home and every opportunity to thrive. I understand the responsibility, and I embrace it fully." The judge, after reviewing the social worker's glowing report and Nate's documentation, smiled warmly. "Mr. Caldwell, it's clear you are providing an excellent environment for this child. I see no reason why guardianship shouldn't be granted. Congratulations, Dad." Relief washed over Nate, profound and cleansing. He held Aaron tighter, whispering, "It's official, little man. You're stuck with me." Later that week, Nate felt compelled to visit Mariah, bringing Aaron with him, hoping perhaps the sight of the baby might spark something positive. The encounter was disastrous. Mariah, initially curious, recoiled violently when Nate explained Aaron was now his son. "Get him away from me!" she shrieked, her eyes wild. "He's not mine! I hate you both!" Nurses rushed in, administering a sedative as Aaron wailed, frightened by the outburst. Dr. Stevens pulled Nate aside afterwards. "Nate, I strongly advise against bringing the child here again. She's not stable enough. Her recovery, it's going to be a very long process if it happens at all." Nate left the clinic that day with a heavy heart but a clear mind. The hope for reconciliation, for the future he'd once envisioned with Mariah, was gone, replaced by the reality of his new life, his responsibility to Aaron. That evening, sitting in his quiet study, Aaron asleep upstairs under Eleanor's watchful eye, Nate called Viktor Ivanov again. "Viktor," he said, his voice calm but resolute, "I need you to start divorce proceedings." There was no malice in his decision, only a sad acceptance of reality. He would ensure Mariah was provided for, that her treatment continued, but their paths had diverged too drastically. He couldn't subject Aaron to that instability. Days later, holding the initial divorce filing papers in his hand, Nate felt not triumph, but a quiet sense of closure. He walked into the nursery, where Eleanor was softly humming to Aaron. He smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. The future was uncertain, the path ahead challenging, but looking at his son, Nate Caldwell knew, with absolute certainty, that he was finally on the right track. His empire might be built of steel and glass, but his future, his real legacy, was wrapped in a soft blue blanket.